Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We review anything and everything. And today we are doing our spoiler review of the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. Now I just did and posted a spoiler-free review. I tried my best not to touch on too many things, but in this review, I'm just gonna run through everything and all my thoughts. So, like I said, you already been warned. It's gonna be in the title of the video that it's a spoiler video. Now, one, they came with a couple of cards, and I just kind of want to show that really quick. You would get a pack that comes with it. You see it starts with Grogu, and it has some stats on it. Then you have the Razor Crest also with some stats on it. But it's almost like it goes to a game, which I don't know. Star Wars Unlimited, is that a game? It says it on this third card, a trading card game, unlimited possibilities. So I guess it is, but I never heard of it. So for those who do know, and you can see on the Grogu card, the back shows also some details. So it's like the character stats on one side, on the back it says some other kind of things or some kind of ability. I'm not familiar with it because I've never played the game. But, excuse me, jumping into the review and my thoughts and whatnot. So I think it was a pretty good movie, as I mentioned in the spoiler-free version. I think it was a pretty good movie, but it did feel like it's like 3 episodes combined. If the episodes are like 45 minutes each, it did feel like it's like about 3 episodes combined, and that's really all it really was. I'll try to go with the best of my memory to run down every aspect of it from like kind of the beginning to the end and just kind of progress through. So one thing I'm going to get out the way is the way he got the Razor Crest again, I think some people had suspected it. Essentially, Sigourney Weaver's character, excuse me, sorry about that. Sigourney Weaver's character pretty much lets him know. So they're almost operating as he's kind of working hand in hand with the New Republic, and it's almost like they have this little alcove base or wherever it is, where it has a few of them. So it's almost like a little, if you want to call it this, even though it looks like a little kind of camp setup, you can almost think of it as like a police station where it's like you got a bunch of these, the same ones who, the bearded guy, I don't know all their names, but the bearded guy who was inside the show, who always flying the X-Wing. You had Zeb, who was also, and I remember him inside the episode he was in, but I forget if they went into any kind of detail on him. I know he was part of the New Republic, the pilots, but that's really about it. I know they kind of just briefed him in it, and I'm gonna get into that in a moment of how like they don't need to connect in detail more on him, but at the same time too, it seems like his connection with Mando kind of really is pretty heavy. And it's kind of weird that, it's just one of those things that are breezed over. We'll get into that in a second. But as far as the whole layout, it's like this is a branch of that and those characters you were kind of familiar with. And it's almost like they're its own little like police group. Well, obviously part of the New Republic's, I don't know if you want to call them military, but this little base location they have makes it feel like it's this little kind of police precinct in a way, for lack of a better term. And Mando's almost like maybe a private eye who joins them sometimes and works with them, though he's not officially on the books type of thing. And he can also do things that the rest of them maybe can't do because he can go outside of their, jurisdiction as far as the New Republic. So Sigourney Weaver's character gets him the Razor Crest. She says, like, we had, I guess, a takedown or something like that from a previous guy, and it's almost the equivalent of if he had a bunch of cars that were impounded, except in this case, his spaceships. And he was like, he just happened to have one of them. There was like, we fully restored it, but it's stock, so they make sure to that be known. And Mando is like, okay, when he gets in, he's looking around, it's stock, but at least it's clean. And I think that's to kind of say like certain things that he may not have on it, they're not going to be on it. And maybe that's their way of kind of getting away from, if you're used to certain things on the previous Razor Crest, he's not going to have them. When the Razor Crest is first shown, to me it almost looks like it's a little bit small in one of the angles, which I was in my mind trying to just justify the Lego version of it. But later on you see it and it does look like it's normal size. So for a lot of people who are fans of Lego, they just can't justify why it's smaller because it's really not inside the movie. With that being said, I wasn't a fan of how he got it so easy, even though it was like very anticlimactic, even though I get it. They just wanted to have a reason to give it back to him, but they didn't do it in a way where, I don't know, maybe if that other, and I apologize that I don't know all the names of the characters off the top of my head, but the other lady who fixed up his N1 Starfighter, maybe it was a thing where, he needed to, I don't know, she later on reached out to him and said, hey, I was able to find one. And it was at a point in time where he really needed it for a certain mission. This was just very casual in the beginning. Here you go. I got this for you. So that was I wasn't a fan of that. Sigourney Weaver's character also is really like the equivalent of what, Carl Weathers' character, I'm forgetting his character's name inside in Grief Karga. I was about to say, I was forgetting his name, have a brain fart in regards to his character inside the show, but she's kind of like what Grief Karga was to Mando back then, giving him missions, telling him information, kind of the person that he's working for. She's not really an active character throughout the movie, majority of the movie. She makes another an appearance of being somewhat active later on in the movie, but it's still very small a role. So it's really just, like I say, setting up, as I mentioned in the spoiler-free review, it's really, a lot of this movie is setting up world building for later on that they can either put in the show, or maybe they might even just give these characters their own show. They might even have a whole New Republic show, and they literally could do that without Mando in it and focus on all the characters that they've been showing for the New Republic already. The bald-headed guy with the beard, Zeb, Sigourney Weaver's character. I even think there almost looks like a scene where there was someone who looked like Sabine, but I'm not too sure because there's a quick glimpse and it pulled away. But she had that typical fighter pilot orange-ish outfit on, but yet I think she had colored hair, short hair. It almost looked like her, but it was such a quick glimpse that you blink and you miss it. So I don't know. But anyway, as far as the story goes, like I mentioned before, excuse me, sorry, that feels like just an episode, 3 episodes combined in one. But it's a nice little fun little story arc. Essentially, what happens is, so Mando is trying, along with the rest of the New Republic, they're trying to get any leftover remnants of these kind of, I'm forgetting the term that they use, but these kind of like, I don't know, shadow lords, for lack of a better word, of the Empire's like higher ranked members that are trying to reestablish the Empire again. And I'll get into the first mission in a little moment, but essentially that's the layout of it. And so he's going to track down these, Shadow Lords. We're just going to call them Shadow Lords. I forget the term that they call them inside that, but we're just going to call them Shadow Lords. So he's out there trying to get these Shadow Lords and take them down, capture them if possible, for the purpose of getting information from them. And that way he's able to take that information and find out more things of where other ones are, operating their businesses and whatnot like that. But and in the first mission, it feels a little bit of comical in the way it goes down. It's a little over the top as well. Mando goes to take on this guy who's at a base in that snow kind of scene area that you see in the preview. And this guy's got a lot of stormtroopers. He's got like 3 of the AT-ATs. I don't know which type of version they are of them, but the AT-AT walkers. There's the smaller workers. What is it again? The AT-RT? Sorry, them having a brain fart. But the smaller, the 2-legged land walkers. There's one of them around, and he's steals that and he's riding it. It's moving super fast. I've never seen one of those things move like that way. I never knew they could. But he's in an impossible situation where he's dodging so many things. It just looks over the top. It almost creates a fun Disney vibe to it. Some people might not like that. I won't say that it makes it on that level of where Leia in the Obi-Wan show was like, where she's running around. I won't put it to that extent where you say it's comical to the extent of that it's unbelievable, but it definitely adds this kind of fun adventure, Disney adventure kind of vibe to it a little bit, at least in those scenes. I'm not saying that you get that later on because you kind of really don't, but just in that scene, it felt like that, like over the top, fun adventure time. He's got Grogu on his shoulder. It brings that element of fun adventure because why are you having Grogu with you on this adventure where at this point now with the New Republic, he's got people who can watch Grogu. So it really kind of brings into play, why would you risk your safety? Where in the original season, for season 1, season 2, whatever case, he was always about not letting Grogu be in danger, and he'd always leave him. The only time he wouldn't, he would leave him at somebody that he knew, what was his name, Quill, or the other lady, I forget her name, I'm sorry once again, but who worked on his M1 ship and got him the M1 ship. But here he's like taking him out on adventures with him, which really doesn't make sense because he's got people to leave him with. He's got the New Republic little base station that he can leave him there with. So that part makes it really seem like, I get it, maybe he's trying to train Grogu and make him, in those kind of experiences. But the situation is way too dangerous, and the chances of Grogu getting hurt seem very high. It doesn't happen, but still. Now, after his first mission, they end up getting ready to send it. That's when he gets the Razor Crest from Sigourney Weaver's character. And essentially what ends up happening is she ends up saying, I'm going to send you on a mission to go see these Hutts. I guess they're like cousins of Jabba. And they need you to find their nephew, which is like Jabba's son. And from there, they're going to give you information on the next target that we have, the next Shadow Lord that we have to get. Essentially, it all becomes like almost like a setup thing because they only wanted to get that other Hutt, Jabba's son, for the purpose of killing him, because then he's the heir to the throne of Jabba. Which also, they're not even on the planet that Jabba was on, because that would be a conflict of what's his name again, Boba Fett, which that whole thing is just kind of stupid a little bit. But anyway, so you end up finding out Jabba's son, and I don't know if this is the same one who was from the Clone Wars episode way back when, not the episode, the movie, like I just mentioned earlier, because there was Jabba inside that, and there was like a baby Hutt inside that. So I don't know, it might be. Down below, you guys can post in the comments after you see the movie if it is or not. But fast forward, and I'm sorry, this is getting a little bit long, but he ends up, and I'm not going to explain everything inside the movie, but essentially, he ends up trying to help his son, Jabba's son, later on, and essentially that gets him in trouble with the Hutts because their mission was to really kill him, but he didn't know that. He thought that he was being captured someplace. He finds out after speaking to Jabba's son that no, he just wants his own freedom. He wants to get underneath the shadow of Jabba and make a name for himself in a positive light, and that his uncles just really want to kill him. So once he finds that out, obviously, what does Mando do? Like he always does, like he did with Grogu, he tries to save him and not bring him back, but that gets him in trouble with them, and now he's getting hunted. They end up hiring a new bounty hunter to go get him, and the bounty hunter actually is really cool. He doesn't do a lot of talking. He actually has a really cool aspect about him. And what I mentioned inside my spoiler-free review was that this character, I didn't mention this character in that, but I was hinting at that this character could be a character that they really could grow on. And he really feels like he could almost be like a new Boba Fett in the sense that he's very dark, he's mysterious, he's good at what he does. He's got an allure to him. He's got his own ship. He's got a little dog with him, like this kind of wolf dog thing. It's like he's got his own style to him. Really cool. He almost has a vibe of Cad Bane, but not exactly. But he's really cool, and he lives. He gets into battles. He does all this stuff, but he lives. And the fact that they don't dive too much into his character really feels like traditional Boba Fett, where in the original trilogy you didn't know anything about him, but he was so cool. So I feel like that's one of those characters here, which kind of gives that same essence of what Boba Fett had, in that same light, in that same vein. So I think is cool, and they can really build off of him. As far as, let's see, later on you have, oh, I'm sorry, before I get to that. So the thing I wanted to mention before about the Zeb thing, I want to come back to that point. So in the very beginning of the first mission, Zeb kind of is flying around in a U-Wing. He drops Mando off because they needed something that's kind of big enough to transport, but not too big. You know, you aren't going to just have him in your traditional X-Wing like the rest of the guys are normally in. So it's almost like that's the drop ship that they're using to kind of drop Mando off, get him into the situation, pick him up. And also, if you got to bring back anybody that they happen to capture, you got space on the U-Wing, because those who are familiar with U-Wing knows it has some good space in it. It's like a transport ship, miniature transport ship. So Zeb is riding around in that. Mando and Zeb are like almost like it's like this kind of good cop, bad cop partner kind of thing. Not good cop, bad cop, but in a sense like two partners going on patrol is what it's like. You know, they're going on their missions, and it's like he's the guy who just stays in a plane, and it's like, you know, giving him feedback when he needs on the comms, and, you know, Mando might be like, hey, pull up the ship. I got the bounty, or whatever the case is. And it's interesting because we don't know from the show where they showed him as just a guest appearance, and I think he was eating or having a drink next to the bald guy with the beard. Once again, I apologize, I don't remember his name. In the show. Here, it's like you jump fast forward to Zeb and Mando being like best buddies, and they go on missions. The way Zeb talks to him is like that kind of like sarcastic remarks, not making fun of him, but almost like, you know, they're in a mission. It's like, oh, Mando, I got to bail you out of this situation again. Or what did you do? You destroyed everything, or that kind of vibe, that fun kind of, we've been buddies rolling together for a while on missions. And it's cool and it's a nice energy, but you do miss that gap in between, and they don't need it. It's not needed because obviously they did show Zeb, you know, in the Mandalorian show, prepping for this in advance. You already knew that Mando had a good rapport with the New Republic. Like I said, the X-Wing guys would sometimes see him and just let him go, do his thing, because they kind of got used to seeing him around and helping out. So there was that rapport. You didn't necessarily need to show it. It probably would have been maybe a waste of time for the movie. But it's almost like you could have got it into an episode maybe of how that happened or how they became close. We never had anything like that in the show. So that's one thing where I'm not going to say it's necessarily a negative or a positive, but it definitely is one of those things where it's like they have this bond, and it's kind of like, all right, their bond is like really close, and you don't really get to see how that unfolded. It really feels like in between that time, there could have been, from the season 3 ending to this movie, they don't tell you specifically, but it feels like it's been at least a good year. And it feels like within that year, there's been a lot of bonding, a lot of hardcore missions. Even Sigourney Weaver's character talks to Mando like, you know, say if he does a mission and he kind of screws up in the mission, and he's like, sorry, like this is how it had to go down. I had no way of whatever. And it's like, Mando, again, kind of vibe where, you know, they've been working together so long where she just expects this of him. And it's kind of like, oh, Mando, this is you, you know? So my point to that is you could tell there's like it feels like a good year in between of hardcore working together, not like a slow year of, you know, I see them every now and then, like similar to how in the series he would bump into Quill every now and then, here and there. This feels like it's like every day we've been working together, every day we've been grinding on these missions. So in that year's time, we're super close. That's how it feels. Which, like I said before, you can't squeeze all that into a movie, but I'm sure a lot of people would have been interested in how that became and all the adventures that they've gone on to get to that point. And then what kind of cements that is by the end of the movie, Sigourney Weaver's character kind of says to Mando, he's like, well, I'm just here. I'm just kind of like a hired gun. I'm not part of the team. And she's like, yeah, Mando, okay. Kind of like, you say that, but you know you're on this team. You know you're on the good guys team. You know, even though you come in, you're just here for the money, but you're gonna, you're working with us pretty much. You're stable. And that's kind of the way she hints at it. So it definitely gives that vibe that they've been working together for a long time. As far as, let's see, anything else that I wanted to really cover, just really, like I said before, a lot. There's a long period of time where Mando, well, he ends up dealing back with the Hutts. They send out the bounty for him. He gets captured. Grogu ends up having a scene where Grogu actually plays a big role in saving him, which I think it's good in the aspect that it gives Grogu a more serious and grown-up role, even though it was a little bit playful, but they didn't do it once again in a way that's similar to the way Leia was in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, where it's like she's doing Impossible Odds. Everything that Grogu is doing, he's not busting into a scene and doing stuff to help Mando from a way of like over the top and guns blazing. It's very within the scope of what his character can do, and he has help. He has help from the Inzellans. Which another thing I want to just sidebar, their ship is so tiny. For those who are into Lego and seen the preview of like their ship from the Lego build, I can tell you right now, that thing is completely not to scale. That ship is so small. Just to give you a reference idea, that ship is probably the size of a king-size bed. That's literally, like, Mando is almost bigger than their ship. So it's super tiny. And it's funny, it's interesting. But I say also, too, that the Inzellans were helping Grogu in terms of rescuing Mando. And everything was done in a scope, like I said, of very espionage-like, very low-key, very, Metal Gear Solid type. You know what I mean? You're sneaking around because they're small. There's not a lot they could do. So they didn't try to make it where it's guns blazing. And they helped him in a way where it's like, it was believable and it wasn't over the top. Mando still was doing a lot to keep himself alive because he easily could have got himself killed. It very much was like a lot of dangerous situations. But that segment of the story branched away from all the rest of the New Republic characters. And so it really became like just Mando and Grogu on their mission. There was a lot of growth with Mando and Grogu at a later point in time of the movie, which really probably was needed to take Grogu a little more seriously. So I thought that was very interesting. And you also end up seeing another side character that kind of helps Grogu out in between that time frame when he's kind of like doing a few things on his own, kind of helping out because he's got to rescue Mando, and then Mando kind of gets a little sick and he's got to kind of revive Mando. And in that time frame, there's some little swamp guy who's kind of like almost like the equivalent of, I don't know, like a guy sitting on like a kind of boathouse on a bayou or something like that vibe. And that's another character that could grow off of, and make more stuff on that, just happened to be in it in this moment. But yeah, like not a lot of time for him, but he could definitely grow on and expand to. So there's a lot of world building that was created inside this movie that they can expand on in so many ways. And I think that part is the key when you look at this and take a step back of the movie, is the key of what they're going for. If they end up actually going for it and capitalize on it, I think that's where the movie's going to have its greatest growth or expansion from this. Is there's so much you can play with in terms of the show or just people getting their own shows. But just as a standalone, if they don't build up on these characters, I think someone watching the movie is going to be very frustrated with that because there's a lot of interesting characters were introduced and it was not really expanded. It may not get expanded on. I really love that the Jabbas, the Hutts, they could really expand more on them as well because it just really dove into this aspect of the Jabba's son having this whole life of his own. He doesn't want to follow in the footsteps of Jabba the Hutt, but it's like he's now this kind of free character who's doing his own thing, but he's a nice character. They really put a lot of work into and built him up. So it's a character that they really could end up expanding on. So that's I want to say really the base of this movie was the ability for expansion. And I really do hope that we see that come to fruition. Sorry if I rambled a lot within the review, but it was a lot to take in. I thought it was very interesting. I thought the bounty hunter guy was really cool. I thought Zeb was really cool as well, and he's fun inside it. His character gets really expanded on, and I've never seen Rebels before, but I can honestly tell you that for those who have seen Rebels, 'cause I know a little bit about it, Zeb is in his own arc, his own journey, and he's in no way attached to like whatever he was in the past with Rebels. But what's interesting though is you do have all the Rebels character in Ahsoka. So they're all here in the timeline, but he's on such his own journey. And I think it's interesting because in Ahsoka show, you have, some other characters from Rebels doing their thing mostly in her show. And then you have Zeb here in Mandalorian. And it really is like taking one, I guess, group or mythos or however you want to phrase it, and they are now being split and doing their own thing. And I thought that was very interesting. So yeah, I think that's really about it. I definitely advise you guys to check it out. I think it was definitely fun. If I had to rate it in terms of, or rank it better yet, I would say, in my opinion, and everyone's different because I know some people consider like Rogue One to be like the greatest movie of all time. I think that Rogue One felt really good because of that last scene with Vader. And I say, aside from that, I would say to me, this ranks on that same level as like Rogue One, in my opinion. Meaning it's a good movie. It was fun. It's not the best, but it's great. It's something that holds its own. I won't say it has a huge repeat value to watch, really. But it's interesting and it's really good for the world building. And I really give it a lot of credit for the world building it's doing for the Mando show or any other show that might, get a spinoff from this. So, yeah. With that being said, you guys, I'm going to end the video now. I hope that, you guys get to check out the video, post down in the comments down below what you guys thought, and I hope that my review kind of helped you guys. If you were on the fence about watching it and you weren't really sure, but you watched this spoiler version of the review, that maybe caused you guys to want to go check it out. Anyway, guys, as always, like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.